Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm LYNDALL STOUT. It is definitely wildfire season in Oklahoma, and unfortunately conditions won't be improving anytime soon. That's where we begin today with OSU Extension fire ecologist John Weir.
Wildfire season is pretty much every year in Oklahoma from November till the end of March. But this year is exceptional. We've entered that really dry period, and we're also, the drought monitor keeps going down and down, and so we're getting drier and drier, and so making conditions more favorable for wildfire, more easier for ignitions to occur from whatever source it might be. And then the biggest thing going on is the wind. We've had a lot of high wind event days, and those are big trigger days for big wildfires. Wind is the #1 driver of wildfires here in Oklahoma, is those big wind event days. So the first thing you need to think about is my home. Think about what's around my home and what do I need to do to protect it. So around your home, keep everything mowed really short. Keep it cleaned up. If you have trees that lose their leaves and they pile up from the wind in the corner of the porch, get them all out. Any kind of flammable materials around the house, make sure that you clean those back, pull them out and get rid of them. Don't stack your firewood on the porch. Stack it away from the house. I know it's convenient to have it on the back porch, so all you got to do is walk out on that cold day and grab the wood and run back in the house. But again, that's a flammable source setting on the porch of your house that could initiate fire into your home. Also, if you have flammable trees around there, make sure they're pruned up so the fire could go under them, not climb up into them. And then the next thing you need to start thinking about is your outbuildings, your barns, sheds, things like that. Again, same principle, mow around them really short, keep them down really close. During the seasons, keep your doors shut, windows shut on your shops and barns, keep them closed. So if a fire does occur, embers don't blow in there and catch things on fire inside. You got the doors already shut and stuff. And then next thing to do is think about your equipment. You want to, when you're done using your equipment, utilizing it, clean it, get all the excess oil, petroleum products off of the, if you had a hydraulic leak or whatever, stuff that may be flammable. Also, again, any kind of residue and stuff that may accumulate on your equipment or implements, wash it off, clean it off so you don't have stuff that could catch it on fire. And then you want to store it in areas where either on gravel or bare ground, or on areas that are mowed really short or grazed really short, so that if a fire does come, you don't have really hot, intense fires going around that equipment and keeping it protected. So #1, make sure everybody stays safe. Do not put anybody in harm's way. None of that equipment or livestock is worth it. So again, never get in front of an oncoming fire to try to protect that or do that. It's not going to be worth it.
Obviously, the safety is a key takeaway, and being prepared in advance. You cannot do this the day of the fire warning.
Right. Whenever you see that fire, or you see that smoke rolling up, that's not the time to be thinking about all this. You need to think about it and prepare that stuff well in advance, so you're not putting yourself in harm's way. Also, you're not trying to get in the way of emergency folks trying to do their job as well. That's where you get a lot of problems sometimes arise, because people want to try to get back to do things and protect stuff that they should have probably done. You should have done long before that time period. So definitely think about this stuff now, before that fire ever occurs, and get it prepped and get it ready to go.
Let's talk about the first thing that you recommend people do as they're getting prepared for the worst.
So the first thing, and this is a great time of year to do it, is check your insurance. Make sure you understand what's covered in your insurance, externally and internally, for your home, for your barns, your equipment, for your land. Also, make sure you understand what those maximums are that you'll be paid on certain things. Now's a great time to review, especially for your possessions, for your equipment, for the various kinds of tools that are in your shop. The other thing I suggest is take pictures or video of your possessions, because you need that record, that inventory, as you're submitting your claim for your insurance. But then also, as you're thinking about replacing things, you don't want to wonder, well, what all did I have that I need to replace if you should lose a barn or a shop or something like that. So that's the very first thing, and this is a great time of year to do it. Just review your insurance, have a good conversation with your insurance agent, and talk to them about, if you don't feel like you have enough coverage or the right coverage, what your options are going forward.
What other kind of records do we need to have on hand, and how do you store that? I mean, I know there are cloud possibilities.
You're right. Having it someplace that is not in the primary part of your house is really important. And I think it's important to remember that if you have to evacuate, you need to move quickly. You don't have time to gather up a bunch of things. So having your records, your insurance contact information, any other kind of contact information for family members handy, have your phone charger, and have kind of that go bag ready that you can walk out the door. And you're going to have a little bit of notice if you have to evacuate to gather up a few things. But the most important thing is to put safety first, and that means getting things together and getting out of the house pretty quickly. So a great way to do that is to have a checklist ahead of time. Know what's going to go in that bag. Know what kind of paperwork needs to be in there, what kinds of records you need to have in there. And then also having a backup of that somewhere on a cloud, save it as a backup in your email, something you can access from a separate location. And kind of speaking of that separate location, making sure your family knows where you're going to be if you have to evacuate. Identify where you're going to go if you can ahead of time, and make sure, because contact is really hard sometimes when these events happen, make sure that everybody knows where to meet and where to be. Another kind of record that maybe you don't think about real often is think about your elderly family members. Do you know what the evacuation plans are for any kind of assisted living that they might be in? Also thinking about young children. Do you know what evacuation plans are for your school and where everyone is going to be? Because you want to be able to meet up together, and you don't want to have to think too much about who you need to call after it's all done.
And we're talking about wildfires today, but this applies to really any disaster that we could face. This is just really the best way to manage your home, your family, your livelihood, and your investments. Let's talk about, if the worst does happen, kind of picking up the pieces after the fact. Just kind of touch on that. That can be obviously a highly emotional time, but you really do need to think about those next steps for your home and your property too.
Absolutely, and that's really where that checklist comes in very handy. When you're very stressed, when you're very emotional, when you're trying to figure out what has been damaged, what is salvageable, you may not even be able to get back on your property yet. Having that checklist where you have those contact information for your insurance company, you need to notify your insurance company about a loss. Also thinking about any kind of federal programs that can be applied for, either state or federal actually. But specifically thinking about federal programs, they always require a notice of loss. And sometimes that has to happen within a relatively quick time frame after you have identified that the loss has occurred. So if we're thinking about pasture, we're thinking about fence line damage, we're thinking about livestock losses. Those are things that a notice of loss needs to go in pretty quickly. The other thing is, again, documentation. You need to document these losses. Again, after it is safe to return, obviously, before any of that documentation occurs, but you'll need pictures and video of the losses that have occurred. Obviously, this can be very hard whenever it's livestock, but that documentation does need to occur so that you can then file your full application for some of the federal programs like the Livestock Indemnity Program or some of the emergency assistance for pasture and fence line damage.
Well, very important information that we talked about today. Lots of resources available through FEMA and, of course, OSU Extension. So we appreciate you talking about this important topic today, Amy.
Thank you.
And for a link to those resources, just go to sunup.okstate.edu.
I'm Wes Lee, and welcome to this New Year edition of the Mesonet Weather Report. After such a warm end to last year, it's easy to forget that we should be in the coldest time of the year. How warm have we been? How about the hottest December ever recorded for Oklahoma? The December average monthly temperatures came in somewhere in the 40s in the northwest and the 50s in the southeast. Compared to the Mesonet long-term average, those numbers were 9 to 12 degrees above normal. This shattered the past record warm December month by a whopping 5 degrees. To put that number into perspective, remember how cold the past February was? It only came in at about 10 degrees below normal. When you factor in the cold February and the warm December, it sort of cancels each other out when you look at the year as a whole. The calendar year departure from average shows a very small 0 to 1 degree change from normal. For those heat lovers out there, don't worry, the warm weather will return this weekend. Next week's forecast from the National Weather Service shows the La Nina pattern will continue and likely give us more warmer than normal temperatures. In fact, they will likely continue to be mostly warmer than normal for the next couple of months. Now here's Gary with more details on the rainfall and drought situation.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, as Wes talked to you about the warmth in December, unfortunately, that also came with one of the driest periods on record in the western half of the state. And so drought continues to explode across the state of Oklahoma, both in intensity and coverage. Let's take a look at the new drought monitor map and see where we're at. Okay, well, it's not very pretty. We do have basically the western half of the state covered in severe to extreme drought. That's the darker brown and also the red. Across eastern Oklahoma, we do have some areas that are just moderate drought, if that's a better way to put it, and also abnormally dry, and just a little tiny bit of far east central Oklahoma with no drought at all. So the amount of extreme and severe drought has exploded over the state over the last 3 to 4 weeks, going through that warm December and also dry December. And this is a long time coming. We do see the consecutive days with less than a quarter inch of rainfall map from the Mesonet. Basically 2 months over much of western Oklahoma, and then as we get out into the western panhandle, 3 to 4 months plus without at least a quarter inch of rain on any single day, and that certainly adds up to problems. Let's go back to just before that streak began. It was due with the water year. That starts on October 1st, 2021, runs through January 4th. It actually runs through the next September 30th, so we do see since that October 1st time frame less than 3 inches over much of the western part of the state, less than an inch out in that western panhandle. The good rains occurred over in east central and down into southeastern Oklahoma, a little bit up into northeastern Oklahoma. But as you go west from there, it quickly drops down to less than half a foot of rainfall over that time frame. Look at that as a percent of normal. So what would you expect over that time period according to normal? Well, again, over much of that western part of the state, it's less than half of normal through that time frame. And of course, as you get into some of those extreme areas, you get down to less than 25% of normal over that time frame. Again, the only good spots in the state would be over there in far east central Oklahoma and scattered about across parts of eastern Oklahoma. The rest of the state just out of luck since that October 1st beginning of the water year. Well, the warmth of December certainly didn't help matters. We've calmed down a little bit, but the damage was done, and now we just need a good rain. Temperature doesn't matter as much now. We just need lots of good moisture. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
We're joined now by Dr. Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist. Kim, why don't you just give us an overview of what's been happening over the holiday break and get us up to speed?
Well, before Thanksgiving, we said that we'd probably see price volatility over the holiday season. We definitely saw that with wheat. Right at Thanksgiving, $8.45. It fell off the next week or so down to $7.50, went back up to $8.30, then came back down to $7.60, back up to $7.75, and then it's been falling off this weekend. A 95-cent move there in wheat. On corn, you started out at $5.65, fell off a dime the next week, and then it worked its way slowly up to $6, fell back to $5.75, back up to $5.90, and this week, late this week, it's been falling off. You look at soybeans, started out at $12.10, it fell off to $11.60. Then soybeans started an uptrend, and right at Christmas, we were at $13, up to $13.20 early this week. wallowing around a little bit, but $1.60 range with beans. So I think with wheat, we definitely have volatility. With corn, some uptrend there, but and a little bit of volatility. But I think soybeans, we've got to say we established an uptrend there.
Let's talk about why wheat has been so volatile lately.
Well, I think you've got to go to tight stocks. You look at the world situation, the stocks have been lower for the last 2 years. And the United States, our hard red winter wheat stocks and all wheat stocks are definitely tight. And so when you have tight stocks, you have a weather market. You look at Oklahoma, 44% of our crop is in poor to very poor conditions because of the drought. You have weather with tight stocks. It's not only in Oklahoma, but it's in Ukraine. They've reported that their production will probably be lower because of dry conditions. And then you got Russia playing political games. They've got that export tax, $2.58 a bushel. They announced this week that they'll probably establish an export quota February the 15th to go through June. But Russia production was lower this year, but their ending stocks are projected to be right at average and their exports slightly above average. So there's some games going on there and things going on around the United States and the world that creates this volatility in wheat, mostly because of tight stocks.
Do you expect this wheat price volatility to continue?
I think it will, and again, because of the tight stocks and the things that's going on around in the world. If we lose a crop somewhere, we've got, $8 plus wheat, or we've had that, we could get $9 or $10 wheat if we lose some crop. But on the other hand, an economist term there, if we get big production, above average production, we could get wheat prices back down in the $7, $6.50 to $7 range.
Do you see any scenario that could make prices decline even further than that?
I think with definitely in wheat, I think we've possibly seen a top in wheat. The market analysts are saying are remaining bearish for wheat prices. I think soybean prices are bullish and positive. Corn probably sideways. So yeah, definitely lower wheat prices, possibly lower corn prices, but bean prices will probably stay relatively high.
All righty, Kim, thanks a lot for great information, and we'll see you next week.
Good morning, Oklahoma. Welcome to Cow-Calf Corner. This week, we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of the stuff we need to have on hand as we go into calving season. As we take a look at winter and spring calving season, one of the things we get into is we're more likely to be calving in inclement weather and have some environmental stress on those cows. And so, well before we start calving, we want to make sure that we got all the equipment on hand and that everything's in good working order, whether it's our calf puller, whether it's just knowing where our OB chains are, knowing that our squeeze chute is working. But one of the important things that we sometimes don't think of is the importance of having multiple packets of colostrum on hand as we go into calving season. Now, as we think about what colostrum is, we often refer to it as first milk. It's actually not milk, as it is this thing that comes out of the cow that is full of something called immunoglobulins. I always have my cow-calf class practice saying that term. We abbreviate it as IG, but immunoglobulins are the key ingredient in that first milk from a cow that gives the newborn calf passive immunity. And we think about this process and the way it works. Typically, a newborn calf should be up, walking, and have nursed within an hour of being born. And in that time, actually ingested that colostrum. We've got, if we think about the digestive system of a baby calf, we've got something in here called an esophageal groove. It permits that milk or colostrum to go straight to the small intestine. Initially, when that baby calf is born, the small intestine gut wall is very porous. It permits that colostrum to get right into the bloodstream, and those immunoglobulins to do their thing to give that calf passive immunity. So when we say we need to have colostrum on hand, if we're ever in question about whether or not a calf has gotten up and nursed, it is a good idea to get a dose of colostrum in them. What is an effective dose? Typically on about an 80-pound calf, about 2 quarts or half a gallon of colostrum is what we would need. We're typically thinking about 5 to 6% of that newborn calf's body weight would be an effective dose. if we are looking at where we can get colostrum, we can actually collect colostrum from fresh cows, potentially get some from a dairy. There are commercially available colostrum replacers that are effective, and we know we need to get the right strength, something over a 100 milligram concentration. Under that, we would think of as a colostrum supplement. Over 100 milligram concentration is going to be a colostrum replacer. Now, if we've actually got fresh colostrum, putting that in Ziploc freezer bags and storing it flat makes it easier to thaw. When we think about that thawing process, it is better to put it in about 122 degree Fahrenheit water bath and let it warm to the appropriate temperature for about an hour than any other means of warming it up. If we get too aggressive in trying to thaw that frozen colostrum with like a microwave oven, we're potentially going to kill off the immunoglobulins themselves. If we heat it more intensely, again, we potentially do damage to the very thing that's in it that gives us that passive immunity. And typically the most effective way to get it in a newborn calf is going to be to let them nurse it or just use a drench tube to get that straight to where it needs to be. And typically we say the sooner we can get that done after they're born, the better, because that gut wall does begin to close off and be not as porous. But if we're going to do it, if we're in question, a first dose as soon as we can, maybe a second dose even 12 hours later is a good management tip.
So ever since the spring, we have seen fertilizer prices starting to shoot up in all sectors of the industry as far as phosphorus, nitrogen, potassium. All three have been caused by different issues. We've had supply chain issues, we've had supply issues, we've had international market issues. And one thing to note is this is not a Oklahoma problem, it's not a US problem, it's actually a worldwide problem when it comes to fertilizer prices and all-time high prices. Now, many would remember the 2008 spike, and that's actually when I started my job, is to see all-time historic high prices for fertilizer in 2008. And unfortunately, the bad news is we're surpassing those prices. We're in $1 a pound of N, we're in 60, 70 cents a pound of phosphorus, and the same for potassium, which is easily 2x where it was a year ago at this time. Right now, some of the biggest challenges that would drive it even further is if we have another hit of COVID where we shut down manufacturing, supply chain and natural gas, maybe production starts slumping. As long as we have natural gas production, we're going to see that. Corn prices being where they are and wheat prices, the fertilizer plants are going to be producing as much as they can. But the world demand from China, from Russia, everybody is hungry for nitrogen right now. So likely we're going to see this price hold for a little bit. I wouldn't expect it to go up too much further, but there's always that possibility that one more straw hits that camel's back and it just breaks it again.
At least from our standpoint, we're trying to implement different strategies, whether it be enriched strips from a nitrogen standpoint, trying to convince farmers to be more proactive than retroactive from a standpoint of not put anything out, fertilize that crop for what you want an APH yield to be or what your APH is.
Going into this spring, we've got to start making some management decisions as far as fertilizer input on both the wheat and our summer crops as we're planning for that. The past dry spell has actually not been a bad thing necessarily, at least for our grain-only wheat. It stayed small. We haven't had a lot of growth, and the drying will have brought up some deep nitrate into more surface areas. So as we get rain, we have had really good root exploration. We should have a little bit more residual if we've had some deep nitrate to come up, which means an important factor. If your wheat or summer crop, soil testing is critical this year. There is such a high value on taking even a good composite sample. So for a wheat crop, really telling folks to consider going out there right now and taking a sample. If you haven't taken one, run it for nitrogen just to see what you have in the tank. We know there's a lot of things that happen, but it'd give you a good idea. If you're a summer crop producer, especially corn, cotton, sorghum, really consider taking some deep soil samples. That might be 6 to 12 inches, it might be 6 to 18 inches. but we should really look at utilizing that deep nitrate this year, at least accounting for it when we go into our nitrogen budget. That value that you might spend $10 to $15 on a composite sample could easily save you $15 to $20 per acre on fertilizer cost. When we go to P and K fertility on all of our summer crops, including soybean, take your soil samples. Those soil tests we have shown over and over again to be highly valuable for P and K recommendations. If you're using a consultant, ask for sufficiency only recommendations. Sufficiency just gives you what the crop needs to make maximum yield. The buildup is just applying extra for the soil to maintain. This year's not a maintenance year. This year's a sufficiency year. Those soil test recommendations, whether it's Oklahoma, Texas, or Kansas, work. Utilize them. For our winter wheat producers, one more thing you've heard me say at least 100 million times on SUNUP is enriched strips. Folks, I know it's January, but it's not too late. We've not had a lot of growth. We've not had rain to incorporate it to point. There is no problem putting out your enriched strips all the way up to or even past green up. So you've got 30 days to get out there and get your enriched strips on. Contact your county educator, see what they're doing, see if they can help you out. And as you heard from Cody, there's a lot of co-ops that are utilizing technologies and techniques like the enriched strip. So see what they could do to help you out.
Input costs will definitely be on the agenda at the upcoming Red River Crops Conference. There's still time to register for the two-day event coming up on January 19th and 20th in Altus. A number of topics related to cotton production will be covered the first day, followed by great discussion on in-season crops on day 2. Registration is $25. Contact your local OSU Extension office to sign up or go to the link on our website. Also on our website, information about OSU Extension's new Master Irrigator program. For 4 days in January and February, producers will receive advanced training on water management, equipment maintenance, conservation, and economics, just to name a few topics. Once again, you can find information at sunup.okstate.edu. That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can see us anytime on our website, sunup.okstate.edu, and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm LYNDALL STOUT. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at SUNUP.